Hi everybody, welcome back to the Kalinsky Academy. In today's video, we're going to be looking at the cell cycle as well as mitosis. So let's get into it. So I want you guys to pay attention to the structures that are going to be important for this topic. And as you can see over here, we have four structures over here. So we have the first structure, which we call DNA. So over here, we can see that this whole structure over here, this is considered to be a DNA molecule. Okay, DNA. And as you can see over here, DNA molecules are present in thread-like structures that we call chromosomes. So a chromosome is basically a thread of DNA. It forms these rod-like structures that consist of DNA, and we know that DNA, it contains various characteristics that determines your eye color, your height, and everything like that. Okay, so in this case, here you have a chromosome, and a chromosome is often connected by a structure that we call a centromere. Okay, centromere, centromere. Okay, and we have these thread-like structures. So in this case, we have a chromosome that is already joined, but if you separate it, it will look like this, something like this. Okay, it will look something like this, and that's we call that an individual chromosome. But in this case, it is joined. And an individual chromosome, once it has been joined, we call it a chromatid. Okay, so two chromatids that are joined together, and we actually call it sister chromatids. Okay, so sister chromatids are joined together by what we call a centromere, and they first start off looking like this. Okay, like these structures. But all these structures, they contain the genetic material, DNA, and they will cater for desired characteristics. Okay, and where do we find these structures, chromosomes? We find them in the nucleus of any cell that has a true nucleus. So any eukaryotic cell will contain these structures, right? And we find them in the cell. It would be indicated in the cell of whatever organism that we are looking at. Okay, so this is very important to understand before we get to the process of the cell cycle. And basically the cell cycle is an indication of what actually happens. Think, for example, how your skin is able to or your body, how your body is able to heal itself. Okay, that is all a process that involves the cell cycle, in how our bodies are able to replicate, make new cells, and also result in certain growth, whether it's growth of hair, growth of new skin as well. So our skin always regenerates every 24 hours. Okay, so what is mitosis? Now, mitosis, a formal definition for it is the division of cells into genetically identical copies of itself. All right. So mitosis refers to the replication of identical copies. So identical copies will be created once it has completed its cycle. Okay. So all cells have the ability to do this. However, some will do it once and lose the ability permanently. And we're going to look at cells that only undergoes one cell cycle. After that, they cannot do it again. So the purpose of mitosis, it is essentially to increase the number of cells for growth. So for examples, that would be hair follicles. We all have hair, and basically our hair grows with a result of a cell cycle, cells undergoing replication and therefore completing its cell cycle. And that's the same for plant roots. So roots that extend into the ground and grow, they grow very long, and that is a result of mitosis as well as the shoots of any plants. They also undergo mitosis, and they are able to replace all the cells or repair damaged tissue. Okay, so any tissue that in your body, or whether it's on the surface of your skin, like for example over here, it's able to repair itself, and that's all because of the miraculous process of mitosis. Okay, so tissues are a group of cells. So we need to remember that tissues, everything starts with the cells, and a group of cells are then called tissues, and we have different tissues that for different functions. Okay, so examples of constant cell division include the skin, the intestines, the stomach lining, even bone marrow. Okay, so all these are examples of parts of your body that undergoes constant cell division. All right, so your skin, when your skin gets scarred, or when tissue gets scarred from your skin, immediately mitosis is starting to take place in order to repair the damage that was initiated or basically caused for whatever reason. Okay, so what about cells that only undergo one-time cell division? Okay, so we call those type of cells specialized cells, in that they have a very specialized function. And in this case, we have nerve cells and neurons. So nerve cells and neurons come from stem cells. So stem cells are considered to be cells that have no specific function or job, right? And that's why when people need donors or stem cell donors, people that have stem cells, they will donate the stem cells so that they can give it a specific function that will eventually differentiate into specialized cells. Okay, so think of stem cells at the beginning stage. So as soon as embryonic development starts within within pregnancy, then there are stem cells located, and they don't have any specific function. But once, think of the fetus, as the fetus is growing its limbs and various parts of its various organs, which become specialized, that's when the stem cells have differentiated into specialized cells. Okay, so nerve cells and neurons, they come from stem cells. So once nerve cells and neurons are formed, they will never divide again. Okay, so one of the interesting things about nerve cells and neurons is that they cannot undergo cell division twice. They only do it once. So think of people that drink or smoke. Okay, so every time they damage their neurons, which are basically cells that are found within the brain, they basically damage it permanently, because these cells, they can't grow back. Okay, they can't undergo another cell division or cell cycle rather. Okay, so that's very important to understand with regards to neurons, and that's why if you drink too much, if you smoke too much, then you can damage your neurons, and you will have a problem, or you will actually experience processes whereby you are unable to respond to situations very fast. Okay, so you are delaying your response or reaction time to certain stimulus, right? Whether it is walking, because people that walk while they are drunk, they are numb, so their reaction time is very slow. Okay, right. So common processes that need cell division. So we have conception. So conception is fertilization of the sperm and the egg cell that will result in a multicellular organism that consists of billions of cells. So think of when fertilization occurs between a sperm and an egg cell, a multicellular organism will start to develop, right? And a multicellular organism has various organs that have specialized functions. So think of the heart. One of the functions of the heart is that it must basically transport blood to all the parts of your body, okay? And it needs to pump blood. So that is going to be a result of a multicellular organism that has various types of cells that have specialized functions. Okay. Another thing is immunity responses. So immunity response is your body's way of protecting itself against foreign pathogens, so then they can fight off pathogens such as viruses, any foreign particles that can cause diseases, right? And we call disease-causing agents, we call them pathogens, all right? And they can also be very important for cloning and by basically making copies of cells. So, as we can see over here, the cell cycle is divided up into 4 sections, all right? So here we have a diagram over here, and these 4 phases make up the whole cell cycle, okay? So the cell cycle is a series of events that takes place in a cell, which results in DNA replication and cell division. So remember the chromosomes that I just showed you guys at the beginning of the video? They are able to replicate and make more of themselves. Okay, so that's the process called DNA replication. So there are 2 main stages in the cell cycle. We have interphase. So interphase is during which the cell grows and replicates its DNA. Okay, so basically interphase is divided up into 3 phases primarily, right? So we have a G1 phase, so we call it a growth phase. Okay, so this would be the first growth phase. Let me just write it here. Growth phase. All right, and this is the first one. All right, so in this diagram you can see that the cells are metabolically active, duplicates organelles and cytosolic components start replicating centrosomes. Okay, so in this case primarily what happens is the cell grows and it replicates its DNA, and that also takes place in the synthesis phase. All right, so this phase is the synthesis phase of the cell cycle. Okay, synthesis phase. And we also have the second growth phase where basically cell growth continues and enzymes and other proteins are synthesized and replication of centrosomes is basically completed. Okay, so this diagram tells you exactly what happens in how long does each phase take. Okay, so interphase, but what's important for us is to understand that interphase takes place before the phase of mitosis or the mitotic phase, which consists of various short phases. All right, so 8 to 10 hours, that will be the growth phase. The cell will start to grow. That's the longest phase, that's the longest period. And then 6 to 8 hours, it will have a synthesis phase where the DNA becomes replicated. So more copies of chromosomes will be made in this phase. And then the cell will continue to grow and condense up until it is ready to undergo the mitosis phase. Okay, so the mitotic phase, during which the cell divides and transfers one copy of the DNA to 2 identical daughter cells. Okay, so daughter cells are basically the result of a cell having completed its cycle. Okay, so here's a nice diagram explaining that, right? So here we have one cell, then the cell is able to make 2 copies of itself. So these cells become daughter cells. Okay, daughter cells. Okay, so that daughter cells are a result of one cell having completed the whole cell cycle, right? This whole diagram, it has completed it and it has generated 2 new cells. Okay, so what happens in the growth phase 1? Okay, so the longest phase, growth phase 1 is the longest phase in which cells prepare for cell division. The cell develops by carrying out protein synthesis, making sufficient proteins. All right, so in this phase, protein synthesis occurs. Okay, so protein synthesis is the making of proteins. Okay, so here we'll have proteins that are made, And with the help of proteins, necessary organelles will start to then develop. Okay, so think of the organelles that we've learned about in cells, like ribosomes, the nucleus, mitochondria, all those organelles. Okay, they are basically going to be made with the help of proteins that are going to be made in the growth phase 1. And the cytoplasm will double in volume. So the cytoplasm is the space inside the cell that will basically double in volume. So it's going to become thicker and more condensed. Okay, so very important to note, the cell needs to have enough nutrients, so that is normally glucose and oxygen, to perform its normal function, and needs to be ready for cell division. Okay, so nutrients such as glucose and oxygen will be needed for the growth phase, and specialized cells can stay in this phase if it never intends on dividing. So specialized cells, if they don't want to intend on dividing, then they will stay in this particular phase. Right, and then the synthesis phase is where DNA replication takes place. So every single bit of DNA in the cell is going to be replicated. Okay, every single bit of DNA. So special enzymes will ensure the DNA base sequence is in the correct order to avoid any gene mutation. Examples of that is the copying of chromosomes, and to avoid any of those mutated genes to be replicated. Okay, so in this case, in this phase, primarily what happens is chromosomes will start to replicate. They will divide, and they will eventually look like this image over here. Okay, and then we have the growth phase 2. So the cells keep growing and develop proteins and organelles. So lysosomes, which are digestive enzymes, they're going to be needed for this particular process. Okay, so that's the cell cycle. So we have interphase. So interphase includes growth phase, G1, synthesis phase, and growth phase 2. And interphase is therefore preparation for mitosis. Okay, so in this case, if you were to observe the change here under a microscope, you won't really see it, but there would have been growth that has taken place. The cells, the chromosomes will have replicated, or the DNA would have replicated, and the cell would have continued to grow. Okay, so it would have grown to a point where you can see that the cells they have condensed, they are more thicker, and therefore it's basically growing. Okay, so no visible change is observed under a microscope. So you won't really see it, but there is basically activity happening in this space, and then it will be prepared for mitosis. And mitosis is then the last section in the cell cycle. Okay, all right. So that is all for today's video. And this was just basically the discussion of the cell cycle and what actually happens before mitosis actually takes place, which we will uncover in the next video. Okay, so if you have any questions, please comment, and I will respond to you, as well as you can also leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And I will then see you in the next video, where we will uncover the process of mitosis. Right, so enjoy the rest of your day, and I will see you next time. Cheers, bye.